In the school, there was only one teacher named Zhang Jinglin, who taught all the classes himself. Others thought highly of the teacher, believing he knew everything. But Ren Xiaosu always had doubts. After all, one person's energy was limited, so it was impossible for Mr. Zhang to be omniscient, right? Ren Xiaosu was always different from others. He liked to reflect when he looked at problems. It was not until he heard Mr. Zhang's class that he knew this was called dialectical thinking. Yan Luyuan was sometimes puzzled because Ren Xiaosu often contradicted Mr. Zhang's views, but he still came to listen to Mr. Zhang's class whenever he had time. In the afternoon, Ren Xiaosu specially took Yan Luyuan to celebrate, not for anything else, but for him to listen to the class in the courtyard in the future. He used to squat on the wall and was too far from the classroom, so he couldn't hear clearly. Initially, Zhang Jinglin liked to close the doors and windows when he was lecturing, which was to prevent the noise outside from distracting the students, but after he found out that Ren Xiaosu was eavesdropping, he would leave a window open. Now, he simply called Ren Xiaosu into the courtyard. Many parents send their children to school not for them to learn, but for the convenience of their future marriage. Especially girls who have been to school can usually marry a good family. In this era, being literate and able to do three-digit arithmetic was already very good. Everyone was busy surviving. If there was barely enough food to eat, who would care if you were educated? So most parents send their children to school without any long-term plan. There are poor and rich people in this small town, and where there are people, there will be comparisons. Yan Luyuan watched as Ren Xiaosu went to the grocery store to buy a cigarette with a filter. Old Wang even proudly said that his cigarettes definitely didn't have any additives and were very safe. 1 for 20, rarity makes it precious. Yan Luyuan asked doubtfully, "Brother, why are you buying cigarettes? You guys let me into the courtyard to listen to the class. I can't pay tuition, but I should show some gratitude." Ren Xiaosu said with a smile, "I know Mr. Zhang likes to smoke." In Ren Xiaosu's view, when someone expressed kindness, he should reciprocate. The two of them went to the backyard of the school during lunchtime. Mr. Zhang was eating fried cabbage. Ren Xiaosu proactively handed the cigarette to Mr. Zhang with a smile. Zhang didn't refuse, but told Yan Luyuan to stay away. "You are growing, and it's not good to smell the smoke." Ren Xiaosu "Thank you, sir, for letting me listen in the courtyard." Mr. Zhang used his matchstick for cooking to light the cigarette, then exhaled a puff of smoke contentedly. "There are not many students who love to listen to lectures like you now. If you want to listen, just listen. From now on, you just stand at the door, but don't enter the classroom." "Okay," Ren Xiaosu agreed. "Sir, I have a question. You say, Mr. Zhang probably enjoyed a rare cigarette, and he didn't mind whatever." Ren Xiaosu asked now. "Sir, you said that humans before the disaster had a lot of technology. We humans have not been extinct, so why don't we see those technologies reappear now?" Mr. Zhang looked at Ren Xiaosu. "In the period after the disaster, humans themselves have not accurately calculated how many years everyone has been struggling. It was good enough to survive every day. Who was there to study? But we should have retained some information, right? If we study it, won't civilization reappear quickly?" Ren Xiaosu was curious. "The generation has been cut off," Mr. Zhang said regretfully. "Let me ask you, if I give you a set of information on how to make airplanes now, can you make one? I haven't studied it. Although having information can save a lot of time, I still have to start from scratch," Ren Xiaosu said. "Yes, everyone is starting from scratch now." Zhang Jinglin looked at his cigarette that was only half left, feeling a bit distressed, as if hesitating to smoke or not. That he wanted to save half of it for later, but would it be a bit embarrassing to do so in front of Ren Xiaosu and Yan Luyuan? Ren Xiaosu was still puzzled. So during those years, didn't anyone overcome the difficulties and continue to study? "No, they all starved to death," said Mr. Zhang. "Are all those knowledge lost?" Ren Xiaosu was not willing to give up. Zhang looked at Ren Xiaosu seriously this time and said meaningfully, "They are held in the hands of a few people." "Alright," Mr. Zhang stood up and said, "Don't ask about this anymore. It's time for class." Ren Xiaosu asked Mr. Zhang one last question. "When was the wall of our refuge barrier built, and why was it built?" "After the disaster, beasts were rampant. It was said that there was an insect tide a long time ago. Humans had no choice but to build high walls to block the danger," Mr. Zhang explained. "But most of the beasts actually don't attack humans actively even after evolution." Ren Xiaosu was curious. "Monkeys are still herbivores, sparrows still love grains, they don't eat people actively." Now the 113th refuge barrier is located in the circle of human survival range, and most of the more ferocious beasts are actually repelled outside the circle. The higher the serial number of the refuge barrier, the more dangerous it is. For example, the legendary number 178 refuge barrier suffers a lot of casualties every year due to the expulsion of beasts, and the 113th refuge barrier, in fact, is already considered inland. There are still many dangers, such as wolf packs, but they are not insurmountable. In that case, why is there a towering wall in such a large human settlement? Zhang laughed. "As long as there are dangers in the wild, refugees can only live by relying on the refuge barriers. At this time, the refuge barriers will have a large amount of cheap labor. Do you think the financial groups behind the refuge barriers do not have the strength to completely wipe out the dangers in the wild? Human hot weapons are more powerful than you think, but why should they wipe them out? They are not threatened. Ren Xiaosu fell into thought when he heard this. Although he was precocious, he was destined not to understand some things because he had not experienced them. This was also the reason why he was eager for knowledge. Mr. Zhang continued, they won't tear down the wall. How could the vested interest class inside the wall give up this natural class barrier? As he said, Mr. Zhang went to change his clothes. Ren Xiaosu asked curiously, why are you changing your clothes, sir? The one you just wore wasn't dirty. Mr. Zhang adjusted his collar and said, the one just now smelled of smoke, and it's not good for the students to smell it. Yan Luyuan was full of respect, while Ren Xiaosu was a little unhappy. Then it's okay for me to smell it, sir. You didn't ask me to stay away just now. Mr. Zhang thought for a long time, get out. At this moment, Ren Xiaosu suddenly heard the voice from the palace in his mind again, task. It's never a bad thing to desire knowledge, but what you learn, you have to teach. Ren Xiaosu was stunned. He didn't understand what this task was asking him to do. During the afternoon class, the students all felt very fresh. There was a Ren Xiaosu who was several years older than them standing outside the door. So many students turned their heads to look at him that it took Mr. Zhang several knocks on the blackboard to stop the students' curiosity. He said, we will have a survival class this afternoon. This was the uniqueness of the school in this era. It not only taught literature and science, but also survival. However, this class had always been a headache for Mr. Zhang because he really wasn't good at wilderness survival. So most of the time he could only recite the preserved materials. Mr. Zhang looked at the students in the classroom, pay attention, don't think that danger is far away from you. Now you have your parents to protect you. When you grow up, you have to learn to protect yourself. Today we will talk about what to do if you encounter a wolf pack in the wild. The students in the classroom actually liked to listen to the survival class the most. Other courses were too boring for their age. The survival class was interesting to listen to. This time, the classroom was silent. Mr. Zhang looked at Ren Xiaosu who was standing at the door listening to the lecture. Come on, you tell me, what should you do if you encounter a wolf pack in the wild? Ren Xiaosu thought for a while and said, you should choose a slope with trees all around, because this way the feng shui of the burial site is better. Mr. Zhang,